Hey, it's Boo Ray from Tampa, Florida, and today we are going to talk about back button focus. Now, before we get started, I just want to remind you that if you go down in the link in the description to my website, you'll see all the stuff that I offer, including 2 free ebooks that are perfect if you're a new photographer. If you're trying to learn photography, I've got 2 free ebooks that will help you out. I've also got links to my coaching if you need some coaching. I've got my ebook on how to work with natural light photography, which is absolutely the first thing you should work with if you are a new photographer, even if you're not a new photographer. And there is a link in the description for a big discount on that ebook, so be sure and check that out. All right, let's talk about back button focus. It's really a pretty simple thing. It's one of those many phrases that you will hear when you start learning to be a photographer and you're like, I don't know, what's back button focus? What's all these phrases? Okay, so here's what it is. It's very simple. When you're using your camera and you're focusing on something, manual focus is when you use the dial on the front of the camera right here to focus. And then autofocus is when the camera focuses for you and it normally focuses on something that you want it to focus on. And that's a whole other video when you start talking about focus modes. But there are a couple of ways that you can activate the focus mode on the camera, that you can turn it on. You don't want it running all the time, because if it's running all the time, it's running your battery down. So you want to turn the focus mode on when you're about ready to take a picture and then turn it off when you're not. Now, probably the most common way, and the way that I do it, is with the button on the camera right here. Your actual trigger button. And this is, if you picked up and messed around with your camera, then you know that this is how it works. You point the camera at your subject and you press the trigger down just a little bit, not all the way, not so much that you take a picture, but just a little bit, and then suddenly it will focus. You've turned on the focusing mechanism in the camera will focus. And then, if it's focused the way you want it to be, you finish by pushing the trigger the rest of the way. So you activate the focusing and then push it the rest of the way, bam, you take your picture. And that's how I would guess most people focus their camera, but you will meet a lot of people, especially professionals, who like to use back button focus. And back button focus is exactly what it sounds like. It's using a button on the back of your camera to focus. And some cameras have a button already dedicated to this. For instance, here on my Fuji, there's a button right there that says AF on. AF on. And that's exactly what that button is for, autofocus on. It does the same thing that the button on top of the camera does when you press it halfway down. It focuses your camera. So you can put your thumb on this button here and focus your camera and then pull the trigger with the button on top, the big trigger. So the question is, why does anyone use back button focus? And to be honest, I don't really know. I don't really know. Here's the thing about back button focus. To me, it's always been a recipe for a problem more than has been a solution to a problem. Because when you use the trigger button to focus, at least for me, when you use the trigger button, you push it, it focuses, you finish pushing it, right? You go all the way. With back button focus, you use your thumb, you focus, and then you pull the trigger. So you're operating two things, right? It's focus picture, focus picture, focus picture, as opposed to just focus picture, as compared to. And so for me, the back button has always just been, I had a problem one time where I was working with someone and a lot of their pictures at the wedding of the bride coming out were out of focus. And I finally drilled down and couldn't figure out why their pictures were out of focus. And then I discovered that it was because they were using back button focus. And what they were doing is they were focusing on the bride, and then they would wait a second before they actually pulled the trigger. And during that second, the bride would step and come out of focus, right? And I always thought, ooh, that's a good reason why you shouldn't use back button focus. It just invites this sort of opportunity. Now, you could do the same thing with the time. You could pull the trigger, and I've done it. You could pull the trigger and focus and then wait, and now they move and you've lost your focus. So it could work either way, but I just think that using two things is a bit much. Now, if you're going to use the back button focus, it does free up this finger to make changes, but you're still going to have to come back to the trigger to take the picture. Whereas if you're using the trigger to focus, your thumb is now free to work a dial on the back of the camera, change your exposure, your ISO, whatever it is you've got your dial set to. You can even have it set to aperture if you want. So I've never really understood back button focus and why people use it. So if you use back button focus, please go in the comments and tell us why. What am I missing about the genius and the greatness of back button focus? But it sounds like a fancy thing when someone says they use back button focus. It's really not fancy at all. It's the simplest thing in the world. They're just using a button on the back of their camera to focus their camera before they take the picture. All right. Don't forget to sign up for my group on Facebook. It is called Pro Photo Talk with Boo-Ray Perry. And also follow me on Instagram and follow me on Threads. And be sure and throw me a like and a subscribe. And check out the entire series, because this series, Boo-Ray Explains, is pretty long, and I am just step by step going through all of the things and all of the phrases and all the terms that you use in photography. And even if you're a photographer who's been doing it for years, you'd be surprised that sometimes you'll hear a term and be like, oh, I'm not actually sure what that means. So hopefully I've covered it here in this group. So go to my homepage and you will find the entire playlist for the Boo-Ray Explains videos. All right. Thanks for watching.